So the main pro and con to picking out an adult dog is basically the exact opposite of the puppies. The main pro is that you're going to know exactly what that dog is like at that age. Their personality is very solidified. Their traits and everything about them, what you see is what you get, right? Who they show you they are is who they are, right? For the most part. But the main con is that there can be some baggage sometimes, not always, because that dog has already lived for a year and likely somebody was taking care of it. And that dog has a year of practice of doing certain things and a year of interactions that may have been good or bad and have taught them good or bad habits, right? So there could be some bad habits to undo and some uphill battles to fight. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes I'll see a dog in a rescue where I'm like, wow, how are you even here? You know, you're such a good dog. And that happens a lot too. So just because they're older and in a rescue situation doesn't mean that they have bad habits. Just know that the likelihood of that being the case is a little bit more so because the dog has had some time to learn things from other people and other interactions, right? That being said, the way I like to train and what I'm going to show you guys here in a bit will basically undo that. From the very beginning, I like to start with neutralizing everything. I'll show you how to go about doing that and how to work through stuff. But know that there can be uphill battles to fight and a little bit of baggage to undo. All right, so finally, let's talk about how to actually evaluate a dog. You know, whether you're evaluating the parents of the puppies you're looking at or the dog themselves. You know, how do you evaluate a dog? How do you evaluate an adult dog? Really, there's so many different tests you could do. You could get as nitty-gritty and specific on these tests as you would like to be. You can do that, although for me, unless I have a very specific picture, very specific idea as to what I need, I think for most pet dog people, keeping it to 4 general topics, or not topic, I don't know, traits is going to be more than enough. And so we're going to go through each one of those real quick and talk about how to evaluate for them. The first one is going to be sociability. So, or how comfortable is that dog around new people and new dogs? You know, and you're also gauging a little bit of reactivity here as well. How much reactivity does a dog have or not to new people and dogs, right? So in order to evaluate this properly, what you want to do is take the dog in question to a very calm, you know, neutral environment. There's not a lot going on. There's not a ton of distractions. And just go out there with a dog, which is you and the dog. It's one-on-one time. It's you and the dog. And when you're in that area with the dog, be very calm, be very indifferent. Don't force yourself on the dog. Don't even try to interact with the dog. Just to be present in the area with them, and that's it. All you're going to do now is sit there and watch the dog. Let them show you who they are, right? Don't influence anything about them. Let them show you who they are. And so don't try to force yourself on the dog, nothing. You're just going to sit there, stand there, and observe. And what you're going to watch for is how does the dog want to interact with you, right? So let's say the dog turns out to show some very sociable signs. So what they may do is come up to you right away, jump up on you, demand pets, right? They're kind of like soliciting attention from you. That dog is a little bit higher on the sociability scale, right? Now that may not be a terrible thing. However, a really high sociability can turn into other issues potentially. A lot of times dogs with high sociability get excited when they see other people and dogs, although we haven't touched the dog part yet, but it's the same idea. And when that's the case, they can become a little reactive towards other people and dogs, new people and dogs, but not in an aggressive or anxious way. They're reactive in like an overstimulated way, right? So if that's something you don't want to potentially deal with, you probably don't want to go with a dog with too much sociability, right? However, if that's not the case for you and you don't care, and for whatever reason it doesn't matter, make a difference, or maybe that's something you want for whatever reason, then you want to look for something like that. On the other end of the spectrum, if the dog is kind of looking at you weird, you know, they always got an eye on you, they're keeping their distance. If you start moving around a little bit, they get a little flinchy, anything like that, so anything that tells you that they're a little uncomfortable about you being around, then you know that dog is probably on the anxious side. Now, generally speaking, if you can avoid the anxious side, you want to, because nothing really good comes from a dog that's overly anxious like that. Typically, there's quite a bit that you're going to have to work through. If you're looking for a bit of a challenge or a dog to rehabilitate, then that may be a good dog for something like that. But if you're looking for a good family pet, that's probably not what you want to go with. But maybe you live on a farm away from other people and you don't get very many guests, and you want to bond with that dog for whatever reason and work through that. Then maybe an anxious dog would be fine. If you don't need to deal with people very much, or if the dog doesn't need to deal with people very much, that could be a case for that. But really, for either end of that spectrum, the middle ground is what you want, at least in my opinion. And that middle ground is a dog that's about as indifferent to you as you are to them, right? So you're standing there pretty indifferent, just watching the dog, and that dog can just kind of look at you and be like, "What's up, man?" And maybe go on its way, pee on stuff, come over and check in with you every so often. You're like, "What are you doing?" And just doesn't care that you're there or not. More or less does their own thing. I would much rather see that than either end of that spectrum personally, because even if I would want a more affectionate relationship with the dog, I know that over time I'm going to bond with that dog. I'm going to build a really good relationship with them, and that they're likely going to come around eventually anyway. The sociability isn't an issue really. So that's why I would recommend for most people that middle of the road between overly social and anxious around new people and dogs. Now, as far as other dogs go, to do this test, it's probably best that you do it through a fence line of some sort. I mean, if you have somebody else to leash up another dog, like a dog that you already have, for example, and you want them to meet, do it on neutral territory, so on territory that's not familiar to either dog. As long as the dog you already have is also good with other dogs, and have them meet and greet very appropriately there. And if you notice that even before, maybe even just on sight, the other dog starts freaking out, whether in an aggressive, anxious, reactive way, or like an overstimulated, bubbly way, take note of that. But ideally, what you're looking for, once again, is a dog that's indifferent, that doesn't give a shit either way that there's another dog here and around me. And they greet each other, do their proper greetings, and then that other dog is like, "Yeah, all right, cool." That's ideal. Because once again, they'll bond, they can become buddies over time, and it's really not that big a deal, even if they didn't, that they became really good buddies, because at the end of the day, you want the dog to check in with you more so than the other dog. So, but roughly, the idea is the same. And just a quick word on reactivity as well. If you notice that before you even get to put a leash on that dog or walk with them, or maybe you get out into the neutral environment and the dog starts freaking out at you, well, that's self-explanatory, right? You don't want a dog like that. Once again, unless you're looking for a project dog and you're trying to test your training abilities or something, that's probably a dog you want to pass on. The next thing you're going to test for is environmental stability. So whenever the dog goes out into a new environment, or an environment they're not familiar with at all, maybe with some new sounds going on and new stuff going on around it, how does that dog react to that, right? Do they start to shut down? Do they get super anxious at like the sound, like loud sounds, right? Or if they start walking on different surfaced flooring material, how do they act? How well do they adapt to new environments, right? And part of the new environment can be the amount of people in the environment, the sounds, sights, smells, all that sort of stuff, just environmental stuff. How well do they adapt to new things? Now, if you are wanting a dog that you can take with you anywhere and everywhere, then you're going to need a dog that's very environmentally stable, or at least isn't showing any super anxious signs right away, right? However, if you don't plan to go with your dog hardly anywhere, like maybe the dog is going to be a homebody with you, or maybe you just don't plan to take the dog anywhere with you at all, that's totally fine. Maybe they're on a farm out in the woods or something. Then you're not going to need that dog to be very environmentally stable, and that may not be a non-issue. Hey guys, how's it going? So I'm sitting here editing the video, and I realized that my dumbass forgot to go over how to evaluate a dog for environmental stability. So I wanted to add this in real quick. I'm just kind of adding this in. Ideally, you want to be able to take the dog to a new environment and around new things, around things that you know they haven't been exposed to, and see how they do. That would be ideal. However, that's not very realistic. That's not something that a lot of breeders are going to be comfortable with, or even rescues. A lot of them aren't going to be super um, trusting of people to go somewhere with the dog, right? So that's not very common. That's not going to happen very often. So what you usually have to do, or what's going to be more likely, is you're going to have to fabricate some environmental things and watch how the dog acts first, and then also watch and see how well they recover from it. Like one example would be to take the dog to a part of the property they haven't been on very much, if at all, would be ideal. So the environment itself is pretty new. You being a new person, right? You should be a brand new person to them. So that's going to be a part of a new thing, a new environmental thing to them. So there is that aspect. So there is a little bit of a tie in with the sociability part. But something else you can do is bring a trash bag or a grocery bag or something. And whenever the dog is not paying attention, they're kind of off doing their own thing, whip it out and fluff it once or twice and make that trash bag sound, and see how the dog responds to it, and then watch and see how they recover from it, right? So a dog that reacts strongly but recovers well, meaning they don't act super anxious for the rest of the time that you're out there with them, or they don't seem like super standoffish of you for the rest of the time. They're still like, oh, okay, something new, but it's all right, everything's fine. That's ideal. That's a good uh, environmental response that you want to look for. That's a check mark. But if you fluff the trash bag once or twice, the dog freaks out a little bit, but then they seem very weary of you and they don't want to mess with you anymore. You can kind of feel that they don't trust you very much, right? That can be a red flag. That can be a sign that they don't recover well to things that catch them off guard and that are new to them, right? So uh, another example would be like dropping something on the floor that's going to make a lot of noise when you drop it, and once again, see how they respond, and see how they recover, that sort of thing. A lot of the tests that you can do easily are going to revolve around noise and loud, sudden noise. That's a pretty good gauge for something like that, or for environmental stability, I should say. So that's what you're looking for. A new stimulus in the environment, something new to them. How do they respond to it, and how well do they recover from it? If they respond to it but recover well, that's great. If they respond to it, don't recover well, that's not so good. If they don't respond at all, and so there's no need to recover, that dog is especially uh, stable. So you're looking for either the reaction and good recovery, or no reaction, so there's no need for recovery. Something you should know too is that this environmental stability is very much, or can be very much, trained into a dog as well. So just because a dog doesn't do too hot uh, in this department initially doesn't mean that they can't learn to be more environmentally stable. A lot of times the environmental stability stems from them just simply not being exposed to enough, especially early on in life. So just because a dog doesn't pass this part with flying colors does not mean anything. A lot of times you can work through it. So really what you're looking for is just an overly anxious, overly standoffish dog that doesn't respond, or that doesn't recover well. If you see like red flag after red flag after red flag, then you just know that that dog's going to be more difficult to work through that in training than a dog that recovers well or doesn't respond at all. So there you go. The next one I would watch for is the dog's energy level. Now, the energy level is pretty obvious. It is a pretty hard one to miss. But energy level, I would describe it as just, movement, really. I would kind of look at how much the dog moves. Do they want to lay down? Can they seemingly not lay down? Like, even when there's nothing going on, they're just moving and they can't stop themselves. They just are going all the time. It's not directed in any way. It's very just, I don't know what to do with myself. That dog is probably on the higher end of energy, right? It just needs to burn some of it off. Now, if, like I think I said this in the intro, I don't remember now, but if you're somebody who works long hours or works all the time, you don't want a high energy dog. You want a moderate or low energy dog. And really, for most pet dog owners, that's what I would recommend is moderate or low for most people. Now, if you're wanting a dog to go on long hikes with, or maybe you're going to teach it to, run along your bicycle, then you're going to need a high energy dog. Kind of weigh that. If you don't plan on doing very many physical things with your dog, you're going to want that energy to be moderate or low. Unless you have a very specific task that you're wanting to do that requires high energy, I would stay a little bit further away from high energy. All right, and this last one I want to talk about is prey drive. Now, prey drive is very similar to energy in that there's an energetic component to it. Of course, there is some energy behind it, but I'd say that it's a bit more directed than just raw energy. Energy is just how much does the dog want to move, how much do they need to burn off. Prey drive is more focused and fixated on something. And just as the name implies, prey drive is the dog's desire to want to go after something like prey, right? So we got to remember that dogs are descendants of wolves, which are predators, and predators go after prey, right? And so they have that still inside of them. Like genetically, they're going to have some level of prey drive. Some dogs, their prey drive is so low that you can hardly see it. And other dogs, their prey drive is so high, they're difficult to handle. So, and everything in between. So when it comes to selecting the amount of prey drive you're looking for in a dog, it really depends on what you want to do with that dog. So let's take the example from the energy portion, where you're wanting to go on hikes with your dog. You're wanting to teach your dog to run alongside you while you're riding your bike. For something like that, you want a dog with high energy, but you want a dog with low prey drive, right? You don't want a dog that's going to rip you off your feet or off your bike at the first sight of a squirrel or a rabbit or a deer or anything like that. So what would be ideal is to have a dog with high energy and low prey drive for that sort of activity. Now, if you're looking to do something that requires a bit of prey drive, like certain training methods require at least a bit of prey drive. For example, this is beyond the scope of this video and demographic, but for working dogs, we want dogs with crazy high prey drive because of all the things that we're going to have to teach them. Is going to require a lot of prey drive. But there's still an element of that can be applied to pet dog people, because let's take, for example, playing fetch and tug with a dog. That's essentially what you're doing. Even though you're playing with them, you're tapping into their prey drive when you throw that ball or you play tug with them. So if you want to play tug and play fetch with your dog, they're going to have some level, at least a moderate level, I would say, of prey drive to do those activities. And even some things like dock diving, if you want to do a dock diving sport, or you want to do fly ball, or even some methods for teaching agility require a lot of toy drive, or in other words, just prey drive essentially, then you're going to need a dog with a bit more prey drive. So really, for most pet dog people, I would recommend anywhere between the moderate high side of prey drive and down to the low end of prey drive, depending on what you need. So to evaluate that, to decide or figure out where a dog lies, I just go straight to the toys, with a tug toy and a ball. Really, two fetch items are my favorite ways to go about it. So I'll get 2 chug-it balls, go out into a very neutral, calm environment, whip out 1 ball, act like I'm playing with it, and watch what does that dog do? How does their body language change when they see that ball? Are they like, oh, that's nice, and they don't care and they go on? A dog immediately is telling me, there's not a lot there, right? Potentially. Then whenever you take that ball and you toss it, what does the dog do? Do they all of a sudden snap out of it and want to chase it because it's moving? Then okay, there's a little bit of prey drive there. But then what do they do when they get to the ball? Do they just go over there and smell it and then walk off? And they're on the lower end of prey drive. Do they go over there and pick it up and trot off with it? Hey, they've got some, right? Then also what happens when you whip out another toy? When you whip out that identical toy and you start playing with the other one, does the dog want to come back to you? Do they drop the one they have and come back to you because they want to interact with the one you're having because it's the one you're playing with because you are playing with it now and it's moving? Or do they want to hold on to that one? Do they want to lay down with it, right? So the dog that spits that one out and comes running back to you to go after this one next is probably on the higher end of prey drive. The one that holds onto the one they have, somewhere on the low moderate side of prey drive. See? And you toss that second ball, and the dog goes running after it, gets it, chomps it. You pick up the one they dropped, the ball they dropped, start playing with that one again. What does that dog want to do? They come back and they're wanting more, or do they settle down and they want to mess with that ball, right?